What's happening, guys? It is Brian Alsruhe with NeverState.com, and today I'm going to try to make a case for the SSB. Now, I know a lot of you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, but an SSB stands for Safety Squat Bar, and it looks kind of like that. And what it basically is a bar that is cambered and it has handles out up front. Many of you have probably seen these used by people like Westside Barbell, Super Training, Brian Shaw, Jim Wendler, Elite FTS, Dave Tate. If that many strong people are using it, maybe you should too. And a lot of you probably actually have one of these at your gym, but either you haven't been looking for it or you have seen it and you just didn't know how to use it. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about some of the benefits of the SSB and why I think it should take high training priority in your squat routine. It will help. Or don't. A lot of people have written this off because they think this is a bar for people who cannot get their arms back into the regular low bar squat position, so they have to stick the handles up front, and you will be right. This was originally designed for people, powerlifters, who were either too beat up or they were coming off shoulder surgery, so they moved the handles up front so that they could still continue squatting and still continue making progress even though they were rehabbing a shoulder injury. And then they realized because of the camber bar, the weight distribution was actually different, and there were a ton of benefits to using the SSB for their squats, to up their deadlift, their squats, building the posterior chain. It hits your back in a completely different way. It hit your legs in a completely different way, and it has done a ton for my own training personally. I've mentioned on the channel before, but I think for Strongman, the SSB squat is right up there with the front squat. For Strongman, the back squat is important. Don't get me wrong, it is absolutely important, but I think the SSB bar actually has more carryover to all your other events like stones, your loading, your carries, all those things. I believe the SSB builds up more muscles than a regular low bar squat would. And of course, front squat is awesome. The SSB hits your core like crazy. And if you're a power lifter and you're trying to use it, it's gonna up your squat, it's gonna up your deadlift, and it's gonna keep your shoulders safer, so you're gonna be able to squat more often without pain and not interfering with your bench day. There really is no downside to this. And before we get further into the video, know that I do not make a dime off SSB sales. I'm simply sharing this because it is something that has worked for me and I want to pass along to you guys. If you decide to go out and buy an SSB, that is awesome. I think it's going to do a lot for your training. If you can convince your poor gym owner to buy one, I think it would do a lot for their gym. That said, I am not making one dime off SSB sales, although that'd be nice. I personally have the Rogue Safety Squat Bar, which I absolutely love, but I do know that Elite FTS makes a Yoke bar, which will do virtually the exact same thing. I've never personally used it, but you can just about guarantee that they are both awesome. Now, as far as buying one for yourself, if you choose to do so, I would tell you to go with whatever is cheaper because they're both gonna give you the same desired result. And typically Elite FTS runs a lot more sales than a Rogue. Do with that what you will. Now, before you jump in and start using the SSB bar, you're gonna need to know a couple things. Number one, your weights are probably gonna drop kind of significantly, significantly. Because of the different weight distribution, when you're coming out of the hole, it literally feels like someone has their hand on the back of your neck, and when you're trying to come out of the hole, they're just shoving your face to the ground. Jerks. It doesn't really seem to happen at lighter weights, so a lot of people, when they're using the SSB bar on their warm-up sets, are like, man, this is awesome, this feels great, I could do this all the time. And then they get a little bit heavier. Then the man with the hammer shows up. So you should probably expect that. The SSB taxes your core, your neck, your traps, your lats, your upper back. Your lower back actually takes a little bit less stress than it would on a regular back squat. That said, when you guys see someone perform a heavy SSB bar and you see their back rounding and everyone's like, your form's terrible, you're going to die, blah, 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 form Nazi, blah, blah, blah. No, you're not. That's just kind of what happens when the weights get heavier with the SSB. It is very similar to screwing up a squat. Like if you drop down for a squat and you start falling forward a little bit and you're trying to save it almost like good morning the weight up, it's going to build those same exact muscles for a messed up squat so that when you do mess up your squat, because it is gonna happen, you'll be able to power through. Now, how often you use SSB squat is gonna be highly determined by your goals and what your end plan is. If you are a strongman, I would recommend almost completely swapping out the back squat for the SSB squat because it's gonna build more of the muscles that you need for strongman. And you're probably never gonna see a standard back squat event in a competition, and even if you do, it's with big wagon wheels or big cylinders, or it's always something cumbersome and big and weird. Oh, strongman. So it's gonna feel closer to an SSB squat anyway. And of course, if you're a powerlifter, you're gonna have to use a traditional barbell a little more often just because that's what you're gonna compete in. That said, if you're squatting multiple times a week, this may give a chance for your shoulders and your elbows to get a little more healed before your bench session or between a bunch of squat sessions. And plus, it's gonna build up a bunch of areas that you did not expect to hit with the normal squat. But the important thing to remember is that this is a tool. It's just like using an axle for deadlifts instead of a barbell. You're still doing a deadlift. It's just hitting different things because you change the actual implement that you're using. You should not completely ditch back squats, although I kind of have, but you should probably think of this more as an assistance exercise, again, unless you're a strongman, at which time I tell you to do front squats and SSB squats and kind of ditch the back squat. I know some people like Brian Shaw, who is the current world's strongest man, and myself, we're both named Brian, so I think we can share that title. But when he's talked about it, his experience seems very similar to mine in that he completely replaced the back squat with the SSB. And then when he was gonna PR or he had it coming up in a contest, he would use a week or two just to get the cues back on a traditional barbell and then hits PRs. That is exactly what just happened to me recently. I've been focusing on the SSB like crazy. I hardly ever touch a standard barbell for squats anymore unless it is a front squat. But as my SSB has gone up, so has my regular squat, even though I haven't been working it. You guys saw a couple videos ago where I hit that 660 SSB squat. When I hit that, I said, if I can hit 660 on the SSB, most likely 700 is there with the regular bar. And then 2 weeks later, I loaded the bar to 700 and hit it, and it really didn't feel that bad. Since it hits your posterior chain in so many ways that you would not expect, a lot of muscles get built, so a lot of people end up seeing results with their deadlift even more so than their squat when switching to this bar, because honestly, when you're coming out of the hole with it, it feels probably a little bit more like a deadlift than it does a squat sometimes. And because of the weight distribution, it's gonna hit your core in a completely different way. And you guys have heard me say it before, I truly believe that squat and deadlift are more core exercises than they are leg or back exercises, because most of the time when people fail, it's a failure in their core. It is not in their legs. You guys can leg press 1,000 pounds, but you can't squat 455. The reason why is not because the power is not in your legs, it's because your core is not being able to hold in place throughout that movement. It's very similar to having a car with the best tires in the world, but an engine that doesn't run. You have the means to do something great, but you're missing that key element that is going to take you to the next level. All right, so now I have hopefully thoroughly convinced you as to why you should be doing the SSB squat. Let's get into a little bit of the basics of how to do this. So very first thing, when you line up on this bar and you stick your head through that window, you want this pad touching your neck, but you do not want it sitting on top of it. If it's sitting on top of your neck, it's going to be collapsing you already before you even start to squat, and typically that does not end well for anybody. That said, if you slide the pad too far back, then you're not taking advantage of the different weight distribution and all the benefits that you can get, and it's kind of cheating. You might be able to do more weight this way, but it's not going to give you the added benefit that the SSB provides. But from there, most of your squat cues are exactly the same. You get a big belly breath, you pick up the bar, you walk it out carefully. Once you're there, I want you to flex your butt to make sure that your hips are underneath that bar and that bar is staying over the middle of your foot. And then push your knees out to initiate the descent. You're gonna be able to stay a little bit more upright on this at the beginning. You want to stay as upright as possible when you're lowering this bar, because it is going to throw you forward as soon as you come out of the hole. So pushing your knees out to descend, just like on the front squat, is going to be a massive cue that you're going to want to focus on. Now, once you get to the bottom of the squat, there is a little bit of debate on what you should do here. Some people say, keep the handles completely neutral, do not move them, don't push them up, don't pull them down, just keep them exactly where they are. And I would agree, but when you're under a super heavy weight, your arms are gonna do things that you had no intention of doing. They have a mind of their own. You're gonna figure out what's gonna work for you as you're doing it. Some people really like to row those handles down to their chest so that it throws more of the weight onto your erectors and it gives you more of a rounded back type of squat, which I think actually does a ton to benefit strongmen and powerlifters, because like I said, if you mess up a squat, you're in this similar situation. So what you decide to do with the handle is gonna greatly be up to you and what your personal goals are and what you're trying to work on. That said, I think just about everyone can agree that you should not shove up on the handles, because that's gonna kick the weight further off your back, which is gonna make the movement easier, which kinda is not the point of using an SSB. You are intentionally making a movement harder so that you build more muscles and different muscles than you would on a traditional squat. So when you go back to a squat or a deadlift, those extra muscles are there and you will hit PRs. That's typically how things go. And finally, guys, the last point that I'm going to make about the SSB is how versatile it is. So if you're doing good mornings, this makes the good morning a much better exercise because your hands can stay in front. You guys know when you're doing good mornings how you kind of cramp up, your shoulders cramp up just because of that hinging motion. The SSB is gonna throw the weight even further in front of you and be a little bit more comfortable in you. I like the SSB good morning a ton more, as well as using suspended good morning. So whether it be pin set to the bottom of the deadlift height, So you start the bottom of the good morning at the same position that you would be pulling a deadlift from the floor, except now the bar is loaded on your back with that cambered bar weight being out in front more, and then you do good mornings from that position. That does a ton to build up your deadlift. If you've never tried those before, I would highly recommend them. The SSB is also an awesome option for the front squat. A lot of people cannot get into that front rack position because of wrist mobility or shoulder mobility, and using the SSB bar as an option on the front squat helps a ton of people out. So it might be worth it just for that. And if you guys watch my yoke video, you'll know that I recommend the chain yoke if you do not have access to a traditional yoke, and the SSB bar is perfect for setting that up and a lot easier to get in and out. And you can take your hands off the bar and the bar will stay on your back no matter what you do. That's not really true. It's not no matter what you do. I guess as long as you don't do something really stupid, that bar will stay on your back. And for that exact reason, I love it for unilateral leg work, because if you get in a tight situation, if you have a barbell on your back and you're doing walking lunges and you need to ditch the barbell, either it's going forward and hitting you on the back of the head, maybe placing your face in the ground, which isn't cool, or if you drop it off back, then your leg is sitting right there. That's a dicey situation as well. But with SSB, you can literally just put your hands down onto your knees, push up with your arms and stand up with it and get into a safer position before you either re-rack the bar or you ditch it. So for things like walking lunges or single leg good mornings or Bulgarian split squats, I think the SSB is a much better implement to use because it is safer and it will help you get all those benefits that you are trying to receive from doing those exercises. All right, guys, so that's pretty much it. I know a lot of you have been wondering what the benefits of the SSB are and why I use it so much in my training. So hopefully this sheds a little bit of light on that. Like I said, I am not making a dime off of SSB sales. So if you choose to do this or not is completely up to you. All that I'm trying to do is share with you my experience, and I can honestly say the SSB has done a ton to help my training. It definitely improved my squat, my deadlift, and all my strongman lifts. So if you are a strongman, I would highly recommend it. And if you are a powerlifter who is squatting multiple times a week, I would definitely try to add this in as a variation. Just give your shoulders a little bit of break so you can go into your bench days as strong and as healed up as possible. Hopefully some of you guys found this helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch up with you later in the week, but until then, go out, do something amazing with your lives, keep working hard, be nice to each other, people, and I will see you then.